First, it's important to note that the October snowstorm was historic. It broke records that have stood since the late 1800s. It brought heavy, wet snow at a time of year when leaves were still on the trees, and making even healthy trees extremely heavy and vulnerable. In fact, the snowstorm was classified as a level 5 event, which is the highest level in our emergency response plan. Level 5 events are considered catastrophic events and are expected to occur every 8 to 10 years. Tropical Storm Irene was also a level 5 event, and it's very unusual that we would be hit with 2 level 5 events in just 9 weeks. Before I continue, I want to take a moment to address a couple of misconceptions that continue to come up in the public discourse about our storm restoration efforts. First, there is a misconception that the company's recent management reorganization resulted in a reduction to our line workforce directly engaged in restoration activities. This is absolutely a myth. I can assure you that the company's physical workforce was not reduced as part of the reorganization. To the contrary, the reorganization affected only office workers who are not engaged in repairing damage to the distribution system during and after a storm. The second misconception I want to address is that the company has decreased its investment in tree trimming programs. This is also a myth. The company has a robust vegetation management program, including a 5-year trim cycle for many of our distribution circuits, and a program to target and remove trees we deem likely to pose a hazard to our overhead lines. Overall, our spending on vegetation management activities has increased significantly in the last 10 years.
At the time of my testimony earlier this week, I objected to the characterization of the October blizzard as unprecedented. And we have a new word this evening, historic. These words are used in large measure to defend or excuse the poor performance of National Grid, which persists in portraying itself as another of the storm's victims, instead of as a national company that deals with bad weather all over the country all the time. Nor'easters are not unprecedented here in the Northeast. And there are many folks locally, and I'm sure here this evening, who recall nor'easters hitting hard in early autumn and right through to Easter as well. Fortunately, the storm hit in October rather than in February, when the weather would have no doubt been far more severe. But no matter when it hit, Madam Commissioner, heavy snow in November, an ice storm in December, like the one in 2008, a blizzard in January, the end result would have been the same. National Grid's vulnerable, poorly maintained system would have failed. And National Grid doesn't just have problems supplying power in the winter. East Longmeadow, part of this district, complained to me earlier this year, and National Grid as well, in the summer, that every time they have a thunderstorm, they lose power. National Grid admitted that their performance in East Longmeadow was very poor. In fact, 6 times worse than their performance any other place in the state, but took no steps to correct it. And East Longmeadow suffered horribly as they did here when that October blizzard hit. I know Ms. Reed is struggling with communications issues, but this is a national company. They deal with storms all over the United States all the time.
The response was unacceptable. The simple fact that we saw 2 line crews bring the center of town on board literally within a few hours so that our infrastructure could be brought online, so the need for our shelter at the high school was reduced dramatically. This should have happened as early as Sunday afternoon, or at the very least on early Monday morning. And one of the reasons I believe that we saw this disconnect, that we saw this lag time in responding, to which I agree is a tremendously significant event, but something that we need to prepare for. Let's be honest. If we're hit with an ice storm similar to what we saw a few years ago just north of us, is anyone really going to be surprised? I would say not. We have to be able to respond to this. I believe what happened was National Grid lost their focus, and they weren't as dependent on people, they were dependent upon technology. 800 numbers, municipal hotlines, websites, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, we did not have access to any of those. What we needed were boots on the ground. We needed someone that we could talk to. We didn't have that. And when we finally were able to get that, that's when we started to see some movement. That's when we saw things starting to be accomplished. There's no reason that cannot occur on day 1 instead of on day 3 or day 4. Another observation, complaint, issue is relying on information coming from National Grid. As a town official, my job was actually fairly simple. I had to be the liaison between my emergency management team and the citizens of Belchertown. That's one primary function, and that's communication, letting you all folks know what we are hearing from National Grid, when you will have your power restored so that you can plan accordingly. National Grid made it such that we could not do that job. And in fact, we were providing incorrect information that was being provided to us, and all that did was lessen the confidence that you all had in your town officials. And that's wholly unacceptable. And that must be improved, that cannot continue. Now, with regards to a recommendation, I think what National Grid needs to do is to have a primary contact for each municipality. Have that primary contact not only familiar with the electrical infrastructure in the area, but also familiar with the town, familiar with the town officials, familiar, most of all, with the town priorities. So they hit the ground running.
My losses to date are somewhere around $3,000. I lost productivity, I lost food, I had to make other arrangements because day to day I didn't know when I was going to get power back. The meals we had to eat out, the transportation costs for my family that I would have never incurred. The only bright side of this whole thing is I got to use my military survival skills and the Boy Scout skills that I'm teaching my Boy Scouts. And we found out that, you know what? You can hunker down for 8 days and survive.
I'm going to take a different stance. I really don't fault the company. I was out there, I saw the devastation, I saw the downed trees. I couldn't even get out of town till like Sunday late afternoon. 202 was blocked, Route 9 was blocked, 21 was blocked, 21 was blocked for two or 3 days. If Belchertown, I took the viewpoint, if Belchertown was the only town out, then I would definitely have an issue. But when every single community around us was out, Connecticut was out, I was in Springfield trying to get gas on Sunday, and someone from Connecticut had driven all the way up to try to get gas too. And that just opened my eyes to how big this storm was. I still drive down the street.
Hi, my name is Dave Lombard. I'm mainly here as a citizen of Belchertown, but most of you probably know that you know me. I'm also a lineman for National Grid. Been doing it for 23 years. There's a lot of flack going on out there, being out in the front lines, being the boots on the ground that people wanted. My biggest thing is, you know, being the first night out there at 3 o'clock, they had me come into work, and they're sending me out there to put fires out. Because, you know, trees are falling all over the place, wires are down. And it was like 6 or 7 times where trees almost fell on my bucket. I'm like, this is insane. What am I doing out here? So our bosses sent us home at 10 o'clock. Come back at 6. I got home at 2 in the morning. That's how long it took me to cut my way back home. People talk about the trees. Paul said, who owns the trees? I don't know who owns the trees. We own wires and poles. Okay? I cut my way home, cut my way up the driveway, cut my way back to work for 6 o'clock. You know, I know people are upset. Communication is key. Half the time we don't even know what's going on because we get put in one certain area.
National Grid failed in a number of ways to serve its customers and this community. It failed by taking precautionary measures over this past summer in trimming trees that were growing into and over electrical wires. National Grid failed by not calling upon resources prior to the storm and having them available on Sunday, October 30th. National Grid failed by not having one work crew appear in Belchertown until Tuesday, November 1st, over 48 hours after the storm. National Grid failed by not communicating with their customers and informing us of what efforts they were making in restoring power. National Grid failed by making promises of power restoration that they knew they could and would never achieve. How could they think they would have power restored on Thursday when they never provided sufficient work crews in Belchertown on Tuesday or Wednesday? In sum, National Grid failed.
Little different spin on things. I applaud the workers and the work that they did. I live on Warren Wright Road, the northern end of town. We were probably one of the last streets to be restored. What we experienced is, not a lot of crews in the area. By Thursday, I saw the first tree crew on our street. They did a good job. They cleaned up the road. By Friday, what was odd was, I saw that same tree crew on my street again, although the work was already done. On Saturday, the entire day, there were 3 tree trucks that sat on our street. Now, I can't blame these guys. I talked to them and said, what are you guys doing? We're just waiting to be told what to do. So, very frustrated. I mean, these guys are working hard. They want to help, but there was a lack of, I don't know, whether it's manpower or leadership to get these crews working on the right things. I mean, technically, if these guys were done, they should have been sent home. That's cost. That's going to cost all of us money. It's going to cost National Grid money. I have neighbors, they'll all testify. I mean, these guys, they did nothing for 2.5 days, they were done, and they sat on our street. That's where they were told to be. Goodell Street, Orchard Street, Saturday, fantastic. Crew from Nova Scotia, 7 trucks. They flew through those streets. They restored, they rehung lines on, that's about 6 miles of road. They were done at 1:30 in the afternoon. They sat on the end of Goodell from 1:30 until 6 o'clock that night. I talked to the foreman. I says, you could go down, why don't you just, you guys can quickly get up. There's only 2 sections where the line's out on Warren Wright Road. Answer, we can't. We've got protocol to follow. We're waiting to be told what to do. I understand that. I mean, they flipped the fuses back on at 6 that night. They still could have kept working. So, I mean, you guys did a great job. You worked hard, brought a lot of manpower in. I think in the future, you just got to think about, how do you get more project managers in there? How do you get these guys that, that know the area, that know where the fusing is, to get these, to help direct these outside crews to get the power restored quickly. That's all.